Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. School bus drivers are in short supply in North Carolina, and it's causing schools to scramble to get kids to school on time. Drivers are quitting because of low pay, disjointed schedules, and student behavior. And they're being lured away by lucrative offers in the private sector for jobs such as delivery drivers. WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst asked school districts what they're doing to tackle the problem, and she joins us now. Emily, welcome back.
Glad to be here.
Emily, walk me through a day in the life of a bus driver in North Carolina's biggest school districts.
So the way it often works is you start pretty early. 5:30 a.m. is when you need to report, pick up your bus. Then you go and you start picking up students, and that's kind of your first round. And then maybe you do a second school, and then maybe you do a third school because, in Wake County, for example, high schools start first, and then middle schools, and then elementary schools. And that staggered schedule helps a driver basically to be able to pick up 3 loads of students. Then when you're done with that, in mid-morning, you have a few hours off before you need to report back, say around 1 or a little later. And so you have this gap in the middle of the day. Maybe you can eat lunch, maybe you run an errands. Some people might, they might work an odd job, mow a lawn or two, to earn some extra income. But a lot of people just kind of have this gap in the middle of the day. Then you go back and you might do 2 or 3 rounds of buses again, those same schools, and then you're done by the evening time. That could be between 4 and 6 sometimes.
And what are they paid for the effort?
So $15 an hour is the minimum statewide. Urban school systems are typically going to pay more than that. So Wake County, they just increased that to $20 an hour. In Durham, they're just a little bit less than that. So we know that you're going to earn a little bit more money. But one thing to remember is you'll be a full-time employee, so you'll have full public benefits, which many people consider to be fairly decent. But you might only be picking up maybe 30 hours a week. Maybe on top of your routes, you'll also have to maybe pick up a field trip shift or, some kind of student activity so you can earn a few more hours and a little bit more pay.
So basically a long day, not a ton of pay, and a big gap in the middle that isn't big enough to pick up extra work for the most part, right?
Right. I mean, it kind of just depends on how many more hours you feel you need to work and what type of job might be able to support those hours. Maybe mowing a lawn or 2 in the middle of the day, which is not necessarily something you would do as often in the winter, isn't maybe the number of hours or the amount of income you really need to bring in. Some people might work just a job on the weekends or a job at night where they can get some more consistent hours.
So it might be no surprise that that they're quitting in droves. What do the numbers tell us?
Right. So we know that basically we've got a ton of vacancies in bus driver positions. So the state has found in 2023, they surveyed school systems and found about 1,600 vacancies. A different group, the State Superintendents Association, this summer surveyed school systems and found over 1,300. They surveyed at slightly different times, so we don't know that it's a true apples to apples comparison. But, that's a lot of vacancies. Either one of those numbers, that's more than 10% of your overall positions. We know that school bus drivers, are less and less seeking renewals of their school bus enhancement portions of their commercial driver's licenses. And people just aren't generally seeking that type of enhancement anymore.
And it's not like there's a shortage of possible drivers, right? It sounds like there's more competition.
Right. So there's still a lot of people getting commercial driver's licenses, which is the type of license you need to drive a school bus. And, but there is a lot of competition, especially for, those light truck drivers. So, kind of think those like smaller delivery trucks making the local deliveries. We're seeing a big increase there. I mean, that is an industry that is growing faster than most industries. U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that's going to grow by 140,000 jobs in the next 10 years. Well, a lot of those are going to be in North Carolina.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear what school districts are doing to attract drivers. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst about a school bus driver shortage facing North Carolina schools. Emily, a number of drivers mentioned student behavior as an increasing issue. What did they tell you?
Right. So, some of the drivers I talked to were kind of longtime drivers. They've been driving for many years, and they described worsening student behavior, and some of that, they said it's not just the students. It's not just kind of this cultural change among students where they're worse behaved. Maybe their parents are also worse behaved. Maybe their parents try to get on the bus sometimes, or their parents just don't really discipline their kids at home. So then they come to school and they're rowdy on the bus. And, the school doesn't maybe discipline some of these students by removing them from the bus. From the school's perspective, they're thinking we got to get kids in school. They need to learn. We're held accountable for student performance. So, bottom line is we have to get the kids to the school. So if the kid misbehaves on the bus, they're not necessarily going to be suspended from the bus. In some places they might be. There are administrators who still are willing to do that, but not everybody is going to discipline in the same way, school to school. And, so they might choose an in-school suspension instead. So that maybe the behavior isn't resolved on the buses. And so some drivers maybe find that disappointing because students they're fighting, they're being loud or disruptive, they're being rude. And so, they just kind of, they basically, if it can happen at a school, it can happen on a bus. And so, the bus driver is just there alone with dozens of students.
You spoke with a number of longtime drivers. Why do they still do it?
So a few reasons. I mean, some of them, they just love students. Loved kids. I mean, so obviously not every student has a discipline problem. Many of them are very pleasant. It's just kind of like the few students who do cause problems, cause a high enough level of stress to really frustrate some drivers. But a lot of them said, they got into it for the kids. Maybe they got let go at a previous job. Someone suggested they drive a bus, and they said, okay, well, I'll do that. And they actually really enjoyed it. They felt like they were solving kids' problems. If a kid forgot their lunch money, maybe they'd hand them some lunch. I mean, just little small interactions with kids really made them feel positive. And for some, the schedule actually did work out. So it was a long day, but maybe, their spouse was able to bring in some income, or maybe the scheduling worked in a way where they didn't have to pay as much for childcare because maybe they could watch the kid in the middle of the day and then, or maybe they were able to transport their child on their own bus. And so, for some people, the scheduling actually worked out in their favor. But, oftentimes they still needed to work other jobs.
Yeah, that disjointed schedule thing seems to be a real bugaboo here. Some rural counties seem to have figured this out. What did you learn from them?
Right. So rural counties tend to be organized in a slightly different way. And part of that has to do with they just don't have as many students. They have these wide geographic areas to cover. And they're transporting students across larger areas to fewer schools. And so oftentimes what they do is they have a single tier system. All their schools start at the exact same time instead of being staggered like they are in Wake County and other counties. And, so what they do is they have somebody drive a bus and then, they either just drive that one bus that one shift, go off, work some other job, and then they'll drive the bus back, or somebody else will drive the bus back after school. But a lot of times in those rural areas, they'll require, let's say, a custodian or an instructional assistant or a cafeteria worker to also have a bus driver's license, a commercial driver's license. And so what they do is they basically drive to their commute to school in the morning is just driving kids on the bus to school. And then they work a full day, and then they drive kids home, and maybe they get paid overtime at the end of the week for all those hours, or maybe what they do is they get some kind of comp time. So maybe you only work a half day on Friday at your custodian job instead of a full day, so that they don't pay you overtime.
Is that something that bigger counties can do?
So not so much. I mean, it sounds like an ideal solution if you were, a school in, Wake County and you said, okay, well, I know an instructional assistant who actually would love to drive a bus to school. That's not necessarily a solution that would work because basically you would have to find a bus. So you would have to make sure there was one in your fleet that was available that could be just parked at the school all day. and then taken from the school in the afternoon. So you would essentially require more equipment. You would have a driver. They wouldn't necessarily, work a full shift or anything, but essentially that affects how the state evaluates your perceived efficiency. And, all these urban districts are compared to each other. And if suddenly in Wake County they've got more buses and more drivers, but they're not transporting more students, then you start to see things like, the cost of, bus rides per student, starts to increase. And essentially when you get downgraded for efficiency, you get less state funding. So counties start having to cover more of their own funding. And also, it's worth pointing out that it's not a perfect solution in those rural areas either, because, a lot of times somebody only wants to be an instructional assistant and they don't want to drive a bus. And they're frustrated that that is a part of their job description. So even in a rural county, you have to think about, is this going to hurt our ability to recruit? But it is something worth noting that vacancies are often lower in rural counties.
About recruitment, you reached out to more than 24 school districts to find out what they're doing to attract drivers. What themes did you pick up on?
Right, so raising pay was a big one. Bonuses was a big one. And some of them have actually been offering bonuses for a while. Maybe in some cases they kind of restructured those bonuses or maybe slightly increased the amounts they were giving. That was the case in Wake County. So bonuses and raising pay are big things they've been doing. And maybe, a recent pay increase was just a little bit more than what they had been doing before. Maybe some of them did salary studies. That was something that a few have done. Durham did that a couple of years ago. Cumberland County Schools did a salary study, just trying to figure out what do we need to pay, and then, kind of basing what you can actually afford to provide on those things.
Well, we'll see if any of it works. Thanks, Emily.
Of course.
That's WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst for her reporting on the driver crisis facing North Carolina schools. Go to the education section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.